one very important date in human history is 221 before the Common Era, when China ended up by being united, not only militarily, but also ideologically, into one big state. It has remained until today with intermittent periods of division. But the unity of China was created because of the Chinese script and the Chinese thought. And the first emperor used that to unify China also politically, but also militarily. And for those of you who are going to Xi'an, you will have the privilege to see, I hope, the recent archaeological find of his huge army in this fantastic place, where thousands and thousands of his warriors, each individually portraited. Each of these statues is an individual standing there in remembrance of the efforts it took to unify this gigantic empire. The Qin dynasty, the first imperial dynasty, was of short duration, but almost as long as the later Roman Empire was the Han dynasty, who really forged Chinese unity in terms not only of its political administration, but also, and its culture, but also ethnically. So the Chinese call themselves today Han, Han people. And sinology, Chinese studies, are called Hanxue. That is because of the importance of this period, which is all equal and even greater in many respects, but as fundamental as the Roman Empire was for Western history. During this period, China expanded, but not really militarily. It expanded in a quite unexpected way for us. It expanded commercially. Because if we look at Chinese history and you read the Chinese history, you will find much of what I've said before, but very little is stressed. The important fact that China was already in that ancient time an important trading and manufacturing nation. This road, which thanks to the peace established by the Han dynasty, this road through Central Asia that led to Parthia and Persia, and then from there to Rome, became the major commercial link between East and West in antiquity. And in the first centuries BC and also later, Rome became absolutely wild about Chinese products, especially silk. Silk was very, very much sought after and really a must for each Roman matron. They all had to have their silken dress. Here you find a fresco, a wall painting from Herculaneum portraying a lady dressed in Chinese silks. This silk trade almost ruined Rome. It brought it on the brink of bankruptcy because the trade was one-sided. China produced, and then Rome, and also, of course, the intermediaries, Parthia and Persia, bought. This is a pattern we will find time and again in Chinese history. But other important developments took place. China was reinforcing also its fundamental cultural unity by adopting Confucianism as the state doctrine. The books from ancient times that were left from the inscriptions I just showed you were re-edited and remodeled into what we call the 5 classics, which are every bit as important as the Western Pentateuch, the Torah of the Jews and the first 5 books of the ancient Old Testament in Christianity. Every young student and every scholar and all those who aspired at public office had to learn these classics by heart. They stand at the heart of Chinese civilization. The sacred books of China, as they were called by James Legge, who translated them in the 1880s, are the canons of Chinese culture and history, the guidebooks for the wisdom of the ancient sages. Formerly, as I said already, all students had to learn them by heart in order to qualify for the state examinations. And of course, these state examinations that go on par with the adoption of Confucianism as the state doctrine and the canonization of the 5 classics, this examination system is a revolution in itself. Because for the first time, not noble people were noblemen, were electable for office. Not just those who had by birth the privilege of serving the state were appointed, but people were recruited on basis of their intelligence, of their insight, of their capability, of their capacities. This imperial examination system that in some ways remains until today, and still in a way the state examinations who qualify students to enroll, for instance, at this university, caught the admiration of the Western world as soon as we started to know it from the late 16th and 17th century on, and has inspired the civil examination, civil service examination in England, and the Grandes Écoles, the comparative examinations for entrance to the state colleges in France until this present day. In China, they remain as in a way for the entrance examinations to the universities, but the imperial examinations were abolished in 1908. Here follows an enumeration of the 5 classics. I show them because they are so little known today, but our Hanban Institute, our institute that invites you today, has the project to make new translations in the next few years in English, but also in other languages, in German, in Spanish, in Italian, in Arabic, so that the whole world may at last have access to the canons of Chinese culture. The 5 classics start out with the Odes, a book of songs. And the first songs, the opening of what we can call the Chinese Bible, or the sacred book of China, are, I don't know if some of you have already read them in the beautiful translation of Arthur Waley, goes back to the 1930s, but still is very readable today. The Book of Odes doesn't start out with the creation of the world. It doesn't say in the beginning or something like that. It starts out with love songs, with men and women singing their love to each other, which is another way to look at the beginning of humanity, and look at the beginning of the world. You have to switch a little bit, of course. It's no supernatural agent, no creator God who's going to make the world. No, we made the world. Men and women made the world. And they made the world through their love. That is the message of the Book of Odes. The Book of Documents has those texts of the earliest state governance, and it stresses the necessary virtue, the human qualities that it takes to have the privilege of leading other people. But most important and central are the rights, the Li, the books who say what you have to learn and what you have to be to become an accomplished human being. And then, of course, the 4th book, which is very well known, abroad, the only one of the five classics, is the Book of Changes, the I Ching, known in the United States especially through the translation of Richard Wilhelm and Baines, published by Princeton University, who sold 500,000 copies of the book, I heard, and who has introduced Chinese cosmology and Chinese divination